If you liked those videos you just saw, I'm gonna show you exactly how I shot them using the Sony ZV-1 in the HLG3 picture profile. I'm gonna show you exactly how I set the camera up, how I exposed for it, and how to color grade it in Final Cut Pro. I'm gonna be using the Sony ZV-1 to show you how I got those shots, but you can really use any Sony Alpha camera. Also, we're gonna be editing in Final Cut Pro, but you can use Premiere as long as you know how to set up projects and color grade. So the first thing that we're gonna do is dial in our settings to get that HLG3 picture profile dynamic range that you saw in those shots. So the first thing that you wanna do is hit your mode button, then go ahead and scroll until you find movie mode. Then you're gonna go to manual exposure because we wanna have control over all of our exposure settings. After our manual exposure is set and we're in the location that we're gonna shoot at, you're gonna have to custom white balance your camera. If you don't know how to do that, I made a video for it and I'll leave it in the description so you can take a look at it, where I explain exactly how to do it and why it's so important. For now, I'll just give you a quick rundown. You go to Function, click on Auto White Balance, hit the up button, takes you to Custom. Click to the right. Now you hold up a gray card wherever you are. You click on set, make sure that the little orange square is within the area of the gray card. Click the middle button again. Takes the picture of the gray card. Now it's set, you click the middle button one more time. If you don't see auto white balance in your function menu, I'll leave directions in the description on how to put it in there. A quick note on custom white balancing. Make sure that you don't have a picture profile set when you are custom white balancing because it'll give the camera a false reading. So now that we have our custom white balance set, we're gonna go turn on our zebras and make sure that they're set to 95. So the way that you get there is you go to Menu, go to Tab 2, Page 7, go to Zebra Setting, Zebra Display On, and we're Zebra Level, set it to 95. I actually have picture profiles, zebras, and auto white balance all set inside of my function menu for easy access, so I don't have to go hunt through the menu system every single time I want to set them. I'll leave directions inside of the description, so you can also put those 3 functions inside your function menu. So now that we have our zebra set and our custom white balance, we're going to set our picture profile. So the way that we get to our picture profile is we go to Menu, Tab 1, Page 9, we're gonna go down to Picture Profile 10. Picture Profile 10, click to the right. Now go to your black level and increase that to +7 by clicking on it just like this. That will just make your blacks darker and the shadows more deep. Next, change the gamma to HLG3. I already changed it here, so you just click on it and then find your HLG3. You can go down to black gamma, which is already set in the middle. Just leave it like that. Skip over the knee and go to the color mode. Make sure it's at BT.2020. For saturation, I took it down to -5 because I was finding that some of the skin tones really had some of that reddish look to it, and it seems to be like the sweet spot for saturation. We go down to color phase and that's at 0. Color depth is also left at 0. And then click on detail. For level, I moved it to -2 because I found that when I was at 0, it was a little bit too sharp. And when I took it down to -5, it was a little bit too dull. So -2 seemed to be like the perfect spot for your detail. All right guys, we got the picture profile set now, we're almost there. Now I just wanna note that a lot of this stuff is just experimentation. This works best for me, but something might work best for you. There might be different locations that have different lighting systems that might require different settings inside of your HLG3 settings. For me, this seems to work inside, outside, and everywhere I go. And this is just where I leave it set at. But it would be best for you to go out and test out where your sweet spot is. So now that we have all that figured out and out of the way, we have to figure out what frames per second we're gonna shoot in. We're just gonna shoot 4K at 24 frames per second for the purposes of this tutorial. All right guys, so now we're gonna take it outside and I'm gonna show you exactly how to get that perfect exposure for HLG3 in the Sony ZV-1. Let's go. So before we start with the HLG3 picture profile, I wanna test out the ZV-1 to see what it looks like straight out of camera and then compare it to the HLG3 after it's been color graded. So we're following the 180-degree shutter rule. We've set our shutter to 1/50 since we're shooting in 24 frames per second. Our aperture is at f1.8, so that means our camera is spaced out, and so we move up from here. So what I'm gonna do is start moving up the aperture until my exposure compensation gets to 0.0. Right about there. As you can see, we have our lovely model perfectly exposed, but in the background, we still have some overexposure. That's the difference between what cameras can do and what the human eye can do. The The human eye has so much more dynamic range than cameras do, and that's why HLG3 shines, because it really brings out that dynamic range. So now I'm going to stop recording and we're going to switch over to picture profile 10, which is HLG3, and test out the dynamic range in that bad boy. Alright guys, so now you can see we are in picture profile 10, and the trick to HLG3, exposing for it correctly, is to start bringing up your aperture until the zebras leave your subject's face, and I even go a couple stops farther than that until I'm about right there, and I think that looks perfect. So you can see exposure compensation is at plus 1.0. Our ISO automatically jumps up to 250 once you start using HLG3, but you're going to see the massive difference in dynamic range between HLG3 and what this camera does straight out of camera. This little ZV-1 can produce so much dynamic range, I will never go back to shooting straight out of camera. Let's go take a look at it in post. Right now I'm in a better lighting environment, so I only had to take the zebras down to where they were off my face. I can still see zebras back here in the background on some of the white spots on the poles and in that sky, but for the most part, I'm perfectly exposed, and this is gonna give me the most dynamic range possible, which gives you an awesome picture. So before we import it into Final Cut Pro, we're gonna open up a brand new library. So we're gonna go to File, New, Library, and I'm gonna name it HLG3, and I already have a folder set on my desktop where I can house this library. Now that we have our new library set up, we're gonna click on the library within Final Cut Pro, HLG3, and we're gonna go over to the right, and we're gonna click on Modify, and change it to Wide Gamut HDR, Change. So now that we have our library set up to Wide Gamut HDR, we're gonna start 2 new projects within this library. The first project is gonna be a reference project where we import the footage that we got straight out of camera. The second project is gonna be set up specifically for HLG3 footage so that we have to do minimal grade. So you go to File, New, Project. We're gonna name this Standard for the standard reference footage. I shot this in 4K at 24 frames per second, and we're gonna make sure that our color space is set to standard Rec 709. Okay, so there's our first project. The second project is gonna be File, New, Project. Let's call this HLG3. We shot it in 4K as well. Now we're gonna make sure that our color space is set to Wide Gamut HDR Rec 2020 HLG. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna import that straight out of camera footage to see what it looks like before we see what the HLG3 footage looks like. So I'm gonna click on my standard project, and then I'm gonna take my footage that was straight out of camera and drag it in. I'm gonna scroll ahead because a lot of this footage was overexposed because we were talking about the zebras and how to expose correctly. And I'm gonna go to the spot where we exposed it correctly, straight out of camera, where the exposure compensation was at 0.0. And I'm gonna hit Option left bracket to cut it off right there. I'm gonna go ahead maybe 10 seconds, and then I'm gonna hit Option right bracket so that I can have a good reference sample clip of about 10 seconds long. Now we're gonna go to our other project, which is set up for HLG3. We're gonna double click on it. We're gonna drag in our HLG3 footage into our timeline. We're gonna scroll ahead to where we exposed it correctly. We're gonna Option left bracket, and we're gonna Option right bracket. After I'm done importing the clip into the timeline, I'll click on the clip, make sure that it has the yellow bounding box, go up to the inspector. If you don't see the inspector, it's right here, the 3 horizontal lines. I'll go to the eye. I'll go down to color space override. If you don't see this menu right here, you just go down to where it says basic, and you scroll down to where it says settings. Now that we have our settings, I go to color space override, and I make sure that it's set to Rec 2020 HLG. If you import your HLG3 footage into your standard project, which is Rec 709, where we have our reference footage, it's very washed out. There's an okay fix for this. We're gonna go up to that eye like we did before. We're gonna click on the color space override, and we're gonna change it to Rec 2020, which helps it out, but it's still washed out. And if you export this video compared to the video in the other project that's customly set for HLG3 footage, you're gonna see a big difference. So now I'm gonna show you guys exactly how I color grade. A lot of times when you shoot in S-Log2 and Cine 4 and other picture profiles, you have to do a lot of color grading in order to get that great picture. But with this setup, the way that I showed you, you almost have to do nothing. So the first thing that I always do is I add a little sharpness to the HLG3 footage because it comes out of camera a little bit dull. So I'll go down to my effects panel. If you don't see your effects panel, you can just click on this double rectangle. Go down here and type in sharpen. Here's sharpen. I'm gonna drag it over to my clip. I'm gonna go up to this little film icon and make sure that it's there. It's at 2.5. Generally, that's perfect. Sometimes I might bump it up to like 3.5, but for the most part, 2.5 is perfect. So now I come up here and I click on the upside down triangle. I click on the little arrow next to color board. I go down to color wheels. I always start with my color wheels. So I tap up the saturation a bit. I'll bring down the shadows. I might pop the highlights a little bit. And then I'll bring down some of the midtones, just like that. After I'm done with that, I go over and click on color curves. I usually start at the bottom left and I work my way right. On the Luma, I'll start moving this a little right. This is where the skin area lies, and I just pop it down just a tad. And that's it. And that's literally all that I do to color grade HLG3 footage. Now that we're done with the color grade, I want to show you exactly how to export it. We can't export it in the H.264 video codec like we would with one of our standard projects because it's so much more high quality, and if you export it in that, it'll become very compressed. So we're gonna export it in Apple ProRes 422. It does become a bigger file than the H.264, but it's worth it when you see the final product. So the way we do it is we go up to the upper right share button, we click on it, go to master file, go to settings. You're gonna make sure it's at Apple ProRes 422 and that the resolution is still at 4K. And then that's it. If you don't want your video to have that large of a file size, you can always export it in Apple ProRes 422 LT or 422 Proxy. Just know that it's gonna lose a little bit of quality. You can't really tell a difference, especially if you're gonna upload it to YouTube anyways. So that's it. Now that we have that footage all done and set, you know exactly how to set your camera up, set your zebras up, expose for the shot, import it into Final Cut Pro, open up the proper custom project for it, grade it, and then export it properly. And if you follow all of those steps, you are going to see your footage go from like here to here. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm Joe with Potter Made, and let's grow as we go. Peace.